Hello and welcome to this episode of the Wired BioHealth Podcast. My name is Jaclyn Hall and I am joined by your show's host, Dr. Evelyn Higgins.
Hey, Jackie.
How was your weekend, Doc?
Good. How about yours?
It was good. You know, the sunny South Florida weather, can't beat it.
Every day.
Every day, sunny and 75. But all jokes aside, today is going to be a really interesting episode on the podcast. We have a guest that I am so excited to bring on. Not only is he a friend of Wired BioHealth, but his background is unmatched.
Absolutely.
So I'll give our listeners a little bit of his bio. So Dave Closson, creator of DJC Solutions, is an established speaker, author, coach, veteran, and facilitator with a passion for linking arms with others to help them live an abundant life. Prior to his current roles, Dave's drive and discipline were developed during his employment as a sergeant in the Illinois Army National Guard as one of the few handpicked for the sniper team. Wow. While the catalyst for his current success, Dave also suffered a traumatic brain injury while deployed, leading to another battle, PTSD and substance misuse disorder. So without further ado, welcome Dave Closson.
Hello, friends. Always a pleasure to chat with you both. Glad to be here.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on. And for all our listeners, thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Honored to have had the opportunity to serve.
Yeah.
Honored.
So, Doc, tell us kind of, and Dave as well, how did this relationship even begin?
Dave, take it away.
Hey, yes. So I am the host of the Drug Free America Foundation's podcast, Pathways to Prevention. And I got to interview Doc on that podcast and learn about what you all are doing. And it just clicked. I was like, wait a second. I need to work with y'all. Just hit the ground running from there.
Yeah, and you're such a passionate host. I mean, you're so invested in what you're doing to try to bring light to people. So great job there too. I think everything you do, Dave, you excel.
So true.
Oh, well, thank you. And for the listeners, my passion for prevention work and all the things that I do through prevention comes from my personal experiences of both sides of prevention and addiction and mental health. So that's where my passion comes from. Got to make a difference in this world.
Absolutely. That's why we're all here, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the Army background, because I'm very curious as to how that plays into your story.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. So we don't have a ton of time, but Cliff Notes version. My dad is a retired sergeant major and was an airborne ranger in Vietnam. To the point where he actually got struck by lightning on top of Hamburger Hill while leading a ranger patrol there.
Whoa.
So military is in my blood. You could almost say, bump, it's in my DNA.
We'll get to that.
Right. But so I always wanted to join the military and serve. I enlisted in the Illinois Army National Guard when I was 17, going on 18. And fast forward to junior year of college, I got deployed to Iraq. And I was 21 years old. I'd finally figured out, I know it took me till junior year to figure out how to do the whole college thing. But I finally figured it out.
Ahead of
boom.
the curve.
Right? Maybe. Ahead, behind. I don't know. But yeah, I got deployed to Iraq. And like you said in the intro, I was Army infantry. I was on our company recon sniper team. My first week in country, I was driving a Humvee and we got hit with an improvised explosive device, got blown up. At the time, I didn't know that I'd suffered a traumatic brain injury. And I was actually back out on patrol that very next day. Wow. I was in country for a year, led over 180 combat patrols. We could really dig into that if you want, but we'll save those stories probably for another podcast. But yeah, so that was my year-long deployment. Came back, jumped right back into college. And this was like 2005, 2006. Not as much was talked about when it came to traumatic brain injuries or TBIs or even PTSD. So I was struggling with those by myself in the college environment, which really just kind of encouraged me to drink more.
Right.
And so then I struggled with drinking for years. But that's a very Cliff Notes background of how military service plays into my story.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that is so important because when you think about not just the TBI itself, but then being untreated and then exacerbated in a wartime environment. I can only imagine what was happening on an emotional level, a social level, but then a physiological level as well.
Right.
So, Doc, what are kind of the hallmarks of a TBI for our listeners who don't know?
Symptomatically?
Yeah.
Well, depression, typically, anxiety, insomnia, and to different levels. But those would be, just for openers, probably lack of focus. Yeah.
To me, that's so scary because it would be so easy to write off those symptoms as just kind of a casualty of war, if you will.
Right.
Of course, these are going to be emotions that you feel, and totally dismiss this TBI event that just occurred and then the physiological impacts of it.
Sure. So kind of like, okay, well, let's treat that insomnia. Here, take this. Let's treat that depression. Here, take this. And meanwhile, you're self-medicating through your entire rest of your college years and then beyond that as a result.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So being in the college environment made it very easy for me to drink. It was almost socially acceptable to self-medicate with alcohol.
Right.
And I didn't have the awareness to even know what I was struggling with. I just knew I wasn't happy and something wasn't right. And I turned to alcohol. But yeah, the symptoms of TBI for me, sleep, terrible sleep, didn't matter what I did. I couldn't get more than like 4.5 hours cumulative of sleep per night.
Right.
And then that would cascade into lack of focus, confusion, low energy, all those symptoms that you listed off. And I just thought that was, this is just how it's going to be. So be it. Embrace the suck. Drive on. Just
right.
You got a mission, so do it.
Right. Would you say that you were living in more isolation, maybe surrounded by people, but were you in isolation with your environment?
Yes. So I actually lived out in the middle of the woods, just me and my dog. I loved it. I kind of miss it a little bit. So physically isolated, even though I'd interact with my peers and whatnot, but even more so emotionally isolated. I never formed very close bonds with friends. It was hard for me to, one, open up and be vulnerable and feel like I belonged, which of course hindered connection and relationship building. But then also it was like I was carrying this weight on my shoulders, and that was just holding me back from being happy or feeling just joy. And so that also made it kind of harder to connect.
Who was the first person or practitioner that brought the idea of a TBI to light for you, Dave, and started putting those pieces together?
Me.
And that's the story of most people that go through the VA.
Sure.
And what's interesting, so I was a police officer for a while on a college campus, and I was always sort of had this level of self-doubt because we'd go through, DUI training, both, cannabis and alcohol. And, one of the first things, I detect the odor of an alcohol-based beverage, or I detect the odor of cannabis. I never could.
Yeah.
And it bothered me because, like, am I going to miss a DUI because I can't smell it? And I saw something online saying one of the symptoms of traumatic brain injuries could be a loss of sense of smell. It's like, wait, what's a TBI?
Right.
So then I looked into it, and then I went to the VA. It's like, hey, can we talk about this?
Wow.
That's how I figured it out.
And here you are in Iraq and get blown up and think, okay, we're good. Listen, next day, not even talking about it, not even anybody to say, hey, let's do a quick assessment here.
Yep. That was June 2005 when that happened. And so, there was not very much talk of TBIs at all. And I'd say our knowledge troop wise in country of even PTSD we've heard about it. Okay, yeah, that's something for, after a war, but yeah, going back out on patrol that next day.
Right.
Yeah, that in and of itself can create PTSD. You just look at how many events took place in succession. Now couple it with a physiological predisposition to self-medicate, right? That was the perfect storm.
Right, absolutely.
On every level. And so I'm curious, was it the TBI diagnosis and then the PTSD and then coming into alcohol use disorder recovery, or what was that timeline like?
Yeah, so the timeline was me struggling with drinking, not feeling happy without having any formal diagnoses of any PTSD, TBI, any of that. But I tried to change multiple times by myself, never quite got to sobriety for any sustained period of time. Then in 2017 was when I finally, the light bulb clicked about the whole TBI issue, and I brought that to the VA and went down to the Polytrauma Institute, and they ran all their tests and whatnot, and finally determined, yes, TBI is in fact what had occurred. So that was 2017. Of course, the event happened in 2005, and I'd been struggling that entire period.
Wow.
So then I started getting help from the VA around sleep. They looked at that as sort of the first big domino to try to tackle. And then that would hopefully have that cascading effect. And so I just got to work learning about sleep hygiene, sleep habits, sleep routines. And that is what kind of kicked off my growth. As far as diagnosis as well, the PTSD came with the TBI. So the TBI is what kind of led to, oh, hey, let's screen you for PTSD, anxiety, and depression as well.
Yeah. One of the things that frustrates me so much in how we create a service connection behavioral health is that it's all still based on vocabulary, like any other area of mental health care, unlike what we do. But the issue is, what if you have someone with high resiliency, an individual such as you, Dave, that is held against you when you're trying to get the appropriate rating?
Absolutely.
And what an injustice to somebody who has done all of this personal work, that post-traumatic growth on your own. And then you say, well, I still need help. Now they're kind of saying, well, you don't need that much help, when physiologically you very much need that much help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Penalized for your resiliency.
Yeah.
Right. My ability to drive on, to embrace the suck and just do what needs to be done. They ask, how is this impacting your quality of life, your day-to-day life? You're still able to function. Well, yes, it just is not fun or easy. It's hard.
Right.
But, okay, well, you're good. 0%.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It's just such an injustice, because we think about first responders in general. You're more likely to choose a job that puts you in those high stress situations because you have these resilient factors.
Right.
And so to think that now, if we have an objective tool to say, although I am a resilient person, still physiologically, there's a lot of areas that require support. And so I'm curious, when you underwent testing and you brought it back to the VA, how was that received? And how did you potentially pivot to say, well, I need more support, let me go out on my own?
So great question. I kind of want to hit pause on that question and touch on something else you brought up real quick, if you don't mind. Yeah. Hold on to that question though, because I'll forget it. You brought up emotions as far as diagnosing, and for a combat veteran, a sniper and infantry, we don't talk about emotions.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with survival in country, is having to keep those compartmentalized. And so we don't let ourselves really feel the full breadth of emotions. We try to tamper them down just so we can function. And so then coming back to civilian life, then having to learn how to, one, let myself have emotions, then understand what those emotions, those feelings actually meant. And then I had to learn how to articulate that and talk about them, which, alibi, I'm still learning how to talk about my emotions.
Aren't we all?
When all of that stacks up and affects treatment, that's a huge barrier if you're expecting us to come in and say, okay, tell me how you feel.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know. I don't know how to say that.
Absolutely.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Like,
even if you're not, I'm good. Yep.
And that's the beauty of the objective data that we provide, because we go beyond if someone doesn't know how to articulate that or emotionally isn't ready to unpack everything that's been going on.
Yeah. And you think about exposure to trauma, it's, trauma is more than just a word to qualify a negative experience. It very much has a real and measurable biological impact. So through Wired BioHealth, we don't have to know what happened to you, that incident, but we can identify the damage that was done and then create a plan to undo it, because what can be measured can be managed. So once we identify those specific biomarkers that have been negatively impacted through trauma, whatever that was for you, that's how we can really start to turn back the clock on these things. And it's such an honor to be a part of your story of healing and continuing to grow, because you were doing everything on your own to this point. I mean,
absolutely.
And then to say, okay, what more can be done? Just what a series of events to have led to this partnership,
right?
Because you're the poster child of the guy who just marches on.
Absolutely. And in reality, the body never forgets an insult. Yeah. We may get to move on from it physically, but all of those things are within us. Yep. And you were experiencing that, Dave, and Art just told that story of really all those insults catching up, and now it's okay. So how do you feel? And you're like, not sure. Yeah.
And with that too, I know you had that question. We've definitely got to come back to that. But with that too, the longer that I've sustained my sobriety, the more attuned I've been to my body and how it's been keeping score. Absolutely. And even more apparent that I'm not quite optimized back to or even where I should be, let alone where I want to be.
Right.
So can you tell me, now that you've been undergoing support with us through the testing, what have been some of the noticeable improvements that you've experienced?
How much time we got left?
As much as you need, Dave.
All right. So I'm going to weave this in to also answer your last question as well. So when I finally brought things to the VA, went to talk therapy to talk about sleep, didn't get much improvement there. So I kind of disengaged with the VA. Years later, I did have since re-engaged with the VA for mental health treatment and talk therapy, and also with the prescriber as well. They first put me on Lexapro and like, hey, you've never taken an antidepressant. Let's just start there. And that made my life worse. And the biggest factor was sleep. And so talking about what I've done and what I do is I wear a Whoop fitness tracker because I wanted to get the data to help me know what to focus on, everything from diet, sleep, exercise, mental health, stress, all of that. So I've been tracking that for years and made great progress. But this SSRI Lexapro set me back. I couldn't sleep. Take it in the morning, couldn't sleep. Take it at night, couldn't sleep. So they switched me to Zoloft and explained, well, hey, it's got a little bit more of a dopamine kick, which, okay, I don't know what that means. I just know I can't sleep and I can't really feel joy or happiness. So they just put me on that and come back in 2 months, come back in 2 months, come back in 2 months. And they just kept upping my dose. Really wasn't doing much. I could sleep a little better with the Zoloft than I could the Lexapro. But I still couldn't feel the joy. My stress or anxiety maybe were tampered down a little bit, but I've got a pretty high stress life and I'm used to having stress. My baseline tolerance is pretty good. That resilience piece. And so when, I ran the biomarker panel with you all, the data just, oh my gosh. eyes wide open.
Yeah.
I travel with it now because I love having that data to say, hey, let me just explain this. What's going on here? Pairing that with all the data that I've been collecting from my Whoop fitness tracker as well, I could see the longer and longer I've been in treatment with y'all, following the treatment protocol, how my sleep, my resting heart rate, my heart rate variability have all improved drastically. Mm-hmm. And not just that, but then the additional insights that were gained from my DNA, those SNPs that y'all looked at, and how that could guide my nutrition, my intermittent fasting, my diet as well, the inflammation markers. It's been great. I've seen 3 nights within the last 2 weeks off the top of my head without having to pull up my data where I didn't set an alarm, didn't take any sleep aids, and I slept over 8 hours.
Wow.
I haven't slept more than 8 hours, even with sleep aids, since before Iraq. It's like, wait, what is going on here?
Beautiful.
Something's working, right?
Beautiful. And isn't it interesting when the VA wanted to start, okay, here's ground zero, we're going to start with your sleep. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're talking about right now, because if you sleep and your cells get to recharge, and we are optimizing those cells in every single way we can from the objective lab work that we've done, we are going to move in the right direction.
And I'd been working on sleep for years, so intentional, very disciplined and structured. And before working with you all, a good night's sleep for me was like 6.5 hours. But now consistently between 7 and 8 hours of sleep a night, and my restorative sleep, so slow wave sleep and REM sleep, averages between 40 and 50% each night of that deep quality sleep. Like, and that's just one of the pieces of data that I've been tracking.
One of the things that I can remember in the meetings that we've had all along the treatment with you, Dave, is that you said your wife noticed you being joyful.
Yes. She's like, you've always been funny, but you've kind of been funnier these past couple of months. And that was just during phase 1 of the treatment protocol. Like right out of the gate. Right out of the gate.
And this is despite having a bundle of joy, new addition to your family. So as far as the reality of having a new baby, the stress level goes here, the sleep goes there. This is all while baby Ella's in our world now.
Yes. Yes. So listeners, our very first child, Eleanor, was born May 29th, a month early. And she spent a month in the NICU. I started the treatment protocol in June. So you would think my stress normally would just through the roof, right? Our first child is in the NICU for a month. Then the whole stress of bringing her home, figuring out how to care for a newborn baby, which I've never done before. Typically, I think it's probably safe to say that can be one of the most stressful periods of an individual's life.
Sure.
And for all of my stress, my metrics, all my data to be trending in positive directions during that time seems huge.
Huge. It really is. It really is. We were up against a fence and we did it. And still going to be getting better and better.
That's, I mean, Dave, I'm so joyful, overjoyed that you decided to come on today, because I really feel that there's going to be so many listeners that identify with at least one part of your story. So the hope that you're giving people who are listening today, and for as long as this podcast exists on the World Wide Web, just so grateful to you, to your service to our nation, and what you do every day now as an advocate, an author, and a speaker.
Thank you all for helping me reach my next level of excellence and be able to bring a little bit of joy back into my life.
We can be part of feel like we're doing something to give you back, Dave, what you've given all of us to have the freedom that we get to experience. So it's the least that we can do. And it's just going to continue to get better and better. And the fact that you travel with your lab results on your phone, nothing makes me happier, Dave, because you're like, this is real, guys. These are data points. This is real. Right? This isn't subjective. Right? This is objective. It doesn't get better than that, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I pair the biomarker panel data with my Whoop data and I say, look, see all these things right here? Guess what? Starting to adjust for them, and all these numbers are going up here too.
Yep.
The data doesn't lie. It's right there in front of you. Can't dispute it.
Data doesn't lie. I love that. And I think we'll leave it there. So for Dave, thank you immensely for coming on today. Dr. Higgins, this was a really great conversation. So if any listeners today have identified with some of the points that Dave brought up or Dr. Higgins mentioned, feel free to call the office. It's 1-888-841-7099. We're happy to talk about your behavioral wellness goals, maybe what's kind of holding you back from attaining those. But I know this is only one part of conversations to come. So thank you so much, Dave. We appreciate it.
Really appreciate it, Dave.
All.
Yeah, getting back to that joy, getting back to that joy. We're digging our way out, and Dave's a shining example. And the things that you're going to do, Dave, you're taking the world by storm, and we're watching. So I love it. I love it, Dave. Thank you so much. And thank you for your service, Dave.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks, Doc. We'll talk next time.
See you next week, Jackie.
Bye.